room's on yet. Scott, is she in the waiting room?
Karen, are you there?
It's showing her on this. Here she comes.
Yeah, sorry, here I am. Here.
Okay, Humbles,
Here.
Holzhauser,
Here.
Henry,
Here.
Wisdom,
Mike?
Mr. Wisdom,
Yeah, I'm here.
Wagenbach.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask everyone to please mute their microphone while we do the Pledge of Allegiance so that we don't have all that feedback. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The board will now move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. At this time, we will move to public comments. Dr. Dearman, have there been any public comments emailed to you or brought to your attention?
No, ma'am.
All right then. This concludes the public participation portion of the meeting. The board will now move on to the information discussion items. As you know, the information discussion items below, this is one item that we've been wanting to focus on, and that is budget and financing. So there will now be discussion regarding the budget and financing as we plan for these uncertain times. We know that there'll be changes to our tax base probably. And so we're going to go ahead and start the discussion. Do we have any discussion or any questions, or does anyone want to start with items that they would like to discuss? Okay, hearing none. I have a few things that I've written down that some board members have sent to me. And I'll just list these, and after I list them, if anyone has other items that they want to add to the list so that we can explore each of these or do some research and discuss them at a later time, we can certainly do that if no one else wants to go first. All right then. I think,
Abby?
Yes, ma'am.
One thing that I thought we should talk about, and I just throw it out there, I don't know what other people think, but I'm just wondering if we should discuss, based on our projections that Damon has given us, the 3 scenarios, should we as a board come up with a plan for, we'd like the administration to come up with X number of dollars in cuts, and options for those? Or, do we think that we should, should we have a discussion, what do board members think? Should we dip into reserves? Should we make cuts in our expenses? Should we do a combination of the two? I mean, do you think we should have a preliminary discussion about that and then maybe look for the administration to give us some ideas of if we want to make cuts in the next year, what are some options for what those could be?
I think that's a very good suggestion. I think the board definitely needs to give the administration direction so that they know what path to follow. So, I guess those are 2 very good questions, and I know that some of us will have differing opinions. I like the idea of saying that, we need to tighten our belts, especially for this coming year. I think if there were going to be more significant cuts, it's probably going to have to be the following year when it comes to any kind of programs or personnel. But I like the idea of putting it in the administration's hands and having them come to us with recommendations of things that they would prefer. Of course, consulting their principals and the union, of course, as well. So does
and I guess what I'd like to see is options. So right. I would, of course, like their recommendation, but, not just one set of recommendations, but
various scenarios.
Yeah, like if we cut, here's some things that could be cut, and here's how much the savings would be. And, and I think as a board, we need to discuss strategically, given the projections, what's a reasonable amount that we should look for next year. And then I think secondly, we should look at, are there any positions that can be cut this year through attrition, so that we don't have to, cut staff next year? Or are there any expenses that can be cut this year? Maybe it's contracts or services or, other things that can help with next year's budget as well.
Right. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Abby, it's Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
Yes, I agree with you, Karen. We need to have triggers to pull, so to speak, right? We need to first determine, where we think we're going to be. So I'm gonna ask Scott and Damon, based on the 3 scenarios that were given, what, and I know you don't have a crystal ball in front of you, but what would you say is the most likely to occur based on what your knowledge of what's happening?
Before you guys get to answer that question, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Looking at the board book, it said something to the effect that Damon Hackett was going to have an update for us. Is there an update that we're going to see tonight?
The information that Dr. Dearman shared probably is the most latest information that we have. He shared out the legislative update, and that was all considering state funding. So we did get into the information that the state funding is going to be level as it was this year. So that was good news. I didn't have any kind of direction as far as anybody having certain things that they wanted presented. But like I said, we can certainly answer any questions. But as far as the rest of that goes, I would say that the timeline from here on out would be, we will present, we'll need to do a tentative budget as an information item in July. In August, then we would need to actually adopt a tentative budget. And then in September, we would need to adopt the final budget. But that's the most recent information we've had since our last board meeting, is the legislative update on state funding.
All right.
Okay. Teresa, did you want to continue?
Once again, I just want to echo Karen and to try to understand, because as we look at the numbers, and thank you, Damon, for providing those projections, we need to understand how far we want to dip into the reserves, because these numbers are very high from a deficit standpoint, to see where we want to be. That's why, I guess we need to look at this very closely, probably more than once a month at this point. But and you're exactly right, Karen, how far do we want to dip into those reserves? And I think we need to provide the administration with a percentage, because if you look at the percentages, they're pretty high as well.
Dr. Dearman, I know you wanted to have a committee regarding this particular issue. And, I know that is something that we can do in the future, but, before we go down that path, I think you probably agree you need some kind of direction from the board of what their expectations are.
That is correct. As far as the scenarios go, I hate to keep saying this, but there are so many unknowns. And one of the items that was of great concern was state funding, and where was that going to be at? Brent Clark, the director of IASA, said it was one of the greatest miracles of this time that state funding is going to remain flat. Now, yes, there are some strings attached to that, but that was better than anticipated. So good news so far at this point, but there's just several things that we just don't have enough information on at this point to say this is what it's going to be. A lot of it's just going to depend on some of these factors and how the economy recovers when we move to phase 4, when we move to phase 5. That will have a significant impact on our bottom line.
One of the things that concerned me about the projections, and I know, Damon, that you had to put it this way because the assessor's office will not give you any additional information, but we have it as negative 1.5 to 2, I think, for the first year. And then the EAV is projected to be flat for the years after that. And with this COVID thing, and the high unemployment rate in the area and business going out of business, I'm concerned that it will not be flat in that second and third year. So I think on the other side of it, whereas the state funding might be better, I think the local funding could be worse in year 2 and 3. I don't know how other people think. I'd be interested if anybody else has thoughts on that.
I tend to agree with you, Karen, that, I mean, it is unknown, but I don't see property values increasing tremendously. But I also know that, this is the unknown. We all thought the stock market would also take a huge dive, and it seems to be holding. So, I'm not sure what that implies, but like you, I tend to want to be more conservative than just hopeful and continue to deficit spend and continue to take a lot out of reserves. But I also know that we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction. I like your idea of attrition. I mean, if we can do that, it surely is a lot less painful for staff. And I think there are several things that we need to consider. And I would like to recommend that we start talking about, what are some things that we can do, whether it's, each of us come up with a list of items that we think could be cost-cutting measures for this year, and then some things for long term. And certainly, we'll have to prioritize which ones are most disruptive to the educational environment. But I think that's something maybe that a superintendent's committee could do a little bit more easily to allow Scott to be able to have his team come up with various scenarios. And so,
Dr. Humbles, I like that idea a lot. We can talk about, you can look at numbers on a page, and say, well, if we reduce that or reduce that, but what is the impact in practice? What does that do to a program? That was one of the criticisms that I've heard the last time that there was some financial cuts made, that a lot of the key stakeholders weren't involved. I'd like to have more of a holistic approach, so that, I think everybody understands the situation that the district is in, no fault of any of ours, but we're responsible to deal with it. And if we can get the input of those that are involved, I think that would be a good approach for the group.
I really agree. I think, the union membership needs to be involved because, as no one wants to cut staff. So it would be helpful to have their input on what things we can do, and so that we can save teacher jobs and still address student needs, but yet by working together as a team, we can make those decisions, and it can be more well-planned, well thought out.
I do think, though, that the board should give direction on what amount we should look at. I mean, not that we're going to approve that in the end, but some direction on, we'd like this committee to look at coming up with a plan to cut, 5% out of the budget, and I'm just throwing out a number. I don't know if that's the right number, or some dollar figure. And then what also might be helpful for this committee is and I don't know what comes first, whether the committee does it or whether the administration does it, but it might be that the administration comes up with recommendations, talking to the principals and their teams on where they would recommend, and then they bring it to that committee? Or do you anticipate the committee coming up with it? I mean,
I would like to see the administration and the team, give us various scenarios. I mean, we all have ideas on things that, that could spend, but we don't often know the implications. I mean, I have a list of things that some of our board members have sent me, and they all sound like really good ideas, but unless we're sitting in the school and working with these people, we don't really know what those implications are. And, one of them could be, looking at class size, how many classes are, offered versus, say at the high school level, a class that maybe students don't take as frequently, but those also have implications for, break periods and just a number of things. So it's really hard for us to know how realistic some of our recommendations are without consulting the team players.
Right.
But I think
I think it's really difficult for people on a team when they're working together to recommend a cut in an area that's going to affect a colleague. I mean,
yes,
I think
that is true. That is true.
I think it's a really, really tough position to put people in. And so there's a limitation on what this committee can do because of that. And so I almost think it should start off, I would favor it starting off being at recommendations of the administration.
Okay.
I
think you have a good point there. I know, everybody has their own territory. But I think we can start easily, and I don't want, to offend anyone, but we can start easily by saying, okay, what positions are mandated by law? What positions, are necessary that have to be there by law? I mean, we could have lists of, the contracts that we have, what services could be or are contracted out. I mean, those are kinds of things that I know that they look at yearly to see if we're getting a good deal. But someone talked about the substitute positions and the the cost of certain substitutes versus others. There were lists. Something else on the list here. I can cutting back on certain services, outsourcing certain services, taking a look at options for incoming employees as far as negotiating salaries. So I mean, and like I said, those are all things that we don't know the implications of unless we consult our staff and our administrators. But you're right. I mean, the administrators need to lead that charge, and there are going to be many people, of course, that would like to see their programs continue, whether it's extracurricular or whatever. But you're right, Karen. It's a hard thing to do when your buddy is, teaching. And I don't want to give an example because I don't mean any specific person, but if somebody's talking about getting rid of, say, fine arts or whatever it is, it's a difficult thing to do to make that decision.
Well, I think you need to understand a lot of that is already happening. Tom Grimm is working with James Barrett in transportation and developing 3 different scenarios where we can save money there. Tom's also working with Lisa Leitner and what we can do in food service. Alyssa Hart's already looking at combining aides in different classrooms, those that we can. Some are required by IEP, but if there's ways that we can combine things, I mean, she worked with Greg Fairchild today and reduced an aide. So many of those things are already in the works, but you need to be cognizant of the fact that out of our ed fund, which we all know that's our biggest fund, 85% of that is salaries and benefits. And, those are guaranteed by contract. So if you say, we want a certain percentage, well, 86% of our biggest fund is untouchable because it's contractually bound. So we're limited to a 14-15% window within just the ed fund. And then of those, how many are really able to be touched? So it will be a challenge. It'll be difficult. Are there ways that we can improve things? Certainly. Those things are happening. It's like we haven't done anything. I've already presented several things that myself have looked to reduce for next year to the tune of about $250,000 already. So those things are in the works already. But again, as we do some of these things and put some of our thoughts onto paper, I'd also like to run it by the stakeholders and say, okay, this is what we're thinking. What are some of the unintended consequences that we're not seeing because we're not in the building?
Yeah, I agree with that. And Scott, one thing I was confused about, though, by your comments, I was thinking there were kind of 2 different plans. One is any plans that we can make for this year for savings. And I know that there can be no cuts to staff this year. But I also think that we need to look at next year. And in that instance, there is the potential for cutting staff or
Are
programs.
you talking about teaching staff, non-certified staff? Because I think, those are two different things.
Right. So you can't cut. Well, I don't know all of the rules on that. I think that's one thing we need to look at. But I know you can't cut teaching staff for this year, right? They need to have been
Right.
notified by April 1 or April
Yeah.
15th or whatever. So I think there need to be two plans. One is a plan for what cost reductions can be made in this next year, which will reduce the number of cuts we need to make in the following year, right? Because there'll be a savings for this year and next year. And then secondly, given the large deficits that are projected in the coming years, we'll probably need to make additional cuts, and some of those may be staff cuts. And I think we need to start looking at those earlier rather than later, to have proper discussion about it and get input from stakeholders and decide. Because those are going to be really, really awful, tough decisions.
And I think that's what Scott was alluding to, and the same with Abby. So, I mean, I think we're all on the same page, just saying it different ways.
Okay.
And we might have different ideas, but I think we really have to have the administration take the lead, because, and stakeholders as well in the trenches. So we make a really educated decision. And I think they're looking like, Scott said he's already looked at 250,000 cuts. And I think there's probably a lot more that they can find and recommend. And so I think that's the way to go, and they're already in the works. And
Yeah,
then
I agree.
I think it's really key that the most important thing that the board does is once we get the information, from everybody that's in the trenches, then we come to a consensus as a board on what we want to see going forward. And then the biggest piece of it, I think the umbrella over the whole thing, is communication is key with all the stakeholders. And I think we have to communicate that message over and over again, where we are, where we're going, on the budget process over the next 3 years, and communicate that message over and over and be very transparent. So I think it really needs to start with the administration and then the superintendent's committee to do this right, from the get-go.
Right. I just think that there are two different plans. One would be for this year, cuts that can be made to lessen what has to be cut next year. And then the bigger plan is, what do you cut, next year? I mean, is that what you're thinking, Scott, or am I
No,
on a
I
different
agree.
page?
I think,
Okay.
short term, what can we do this year? But then for the coming years, not just 1 year, can we develop different scenarios? Because again, we don't know what it's going to be, but similar to what Damon did with his budget projections, kind of a 3-stage approach, least impact, middle of the road, and then like a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan.
I might make a suggestion at this point. If everyone, and I'm sure, I'm assuming that every board member has Damon's projections in front of them, or Teresa's 1-page summary. Me being a simple man, I have Teresa's summary in front of me, and the swings between scenario 1 and scenario 3 are wild. Scenario 1 shows and that's the best, the most optimistic situation. That shows a red budget of $3.3 million. Scenario 3 is dire, and it shows $10.8 million. Now, we should have a baseline to start from, and we don't right now. That's like a $7.5 million swing. How much we have to try to, how much of that gap we have to try to plug. We really should try to get our arms around what is the real gap to the best that we can picture it, given the circumstances. And frankly, since Damon came up with his projections, we have yet more information. Dr. Dearman's already pointed out to us, all of our projections are based on state-based funding. Scenario 1 is 100%. Scenario 2 is 90%. Scenario 3 is 80%. We already know that's going to be 100%. Okay. Property tax received, our biggest one. Scenario 1, 97%. Scenario 2, 90%. Scenario 3, 85%. I watched the county when they were doing their budget. They had big issues they had to deal with. They're making the assumption that property taxes are down 5%. That's probably not a bad proposition. We don't have that. We have 97 and we have 90. But what I'm suggesting is maybe walking through these budget projections with each one of these items, the property tax received, the state-based funding, and which one of those do we think is most likely to materialize? And then Damon or Teresa can put together the most likely scenario as we see it, and it gives us a baseline on what we're really thinking that our deficit is going to be, at least for this year. And we can get through this year and then start aiming for next year. That's my suggestion.
I agree with that, Mike. This is Teresa. One other comment I want to make, and I know we're talking about, reducing the budget now, and Scott and Damon and the administrative staff probably know this, based on how we go back to school in the fall, when that plan's put together, we can see increased costs, whether it's transportation, whether we have to do additional cleaning, what all those requirements are that every business is facing right now with COVID. So have you, Scott or Damon, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've got about $300,000 coming through the CARES Act that we can use towards some of those expenses. Some of that's going to go to private schools. So Matt Andrews has been working on that. So about 30 to 40,000 has kind of been earmarked, but there's a whole scuttlebutt between the United States Secretary of Education and the private schools on how that's going to be done. So we have to earmark that money. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out yet, but there'll be a significant amount of money to do some of these things. A lot of which we haven't used yet because we didn't need to. A lot of schools are using it for technology upgrades for those that weren't one-to-one. We already are one-to-one, and this year, thank goodness, was actually our year off of Chromebooks because we'd have a hard time getting them if we needed them anyway. So thank goodness the timing just worked out the way it did. So yeah, there's going to be some additional expenses there, but there is some revenue to cover that. I think another avenue that we're not discussing that we need to also have on the radar is, yes, we're at expenses, and Mike said scenario 1 was like a $3 million deficit. You can't cut your way out of that with staff. You're looking at 40 to 45 teachers. I don't think there's any way we could cut 40 to 45 teachers to close a $3 million gap, because that's our biggest expense is people. So I think we need to do some of what Mike's already been working on and looking at different ways to increase revenues as well.
Having said that, Scott, I made a suggestion that we do something with our money market funds earlier this week. And are we putting that into action?
I'll let Damon speak to that because he had a meeting today.
Yes, that is all in action. My team met with the bank this afternoon, and the wheels are in motion. So we'll be getting that done very shortly.
All right, and I'll point out to the rest of the board that a committee has been formed, the select committee for the RFP for the investment management firm. We have more information. We're meeting on that tomorrow. I would like to try to move that process along as quickly as possible. So that we can try to generate more revenue, because Scott's right, you can't cut your way to prosperity. So let's do what we can to generate additional revenues so that we don't have to make as big cuts. But I think we need to go back to what are we really looking at, because there's a massive difference between 3.3 million and 10.8 million, and the cuts don't have to go so deep, or efforts don't have to go so deep if it's on the slighter side. Or we don't have to dig as far into our revenues. That's one thing nobody's talked about. I think every one of us knows we're going to be dipping into revenues. The question is how far.
So Mike, it's Teresa. If I'm hearing you correctly, you're wanting to go through this each line and try to identify which one that we think is the most likely to happen. For example,
Yeah.
property tax received. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's my suggestion. I mean, I'd start, property tax received. I guess I wouldn't use one of these scenarios. I'd bounce off the county and use 95%.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next question is corporate personal property replacement tax. And which one of these do we think is the most likely? And then the next one and the next one.
I agree.
Some of these we can't do anything about, so it is what it is. But let's try and give ourselves a little bit more of an accurate estimate of where we're going to be. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, good idea. I like that. And then I think you come up with, okay, what's a good amount to shoot for in spending reductions, and what's a good amount to shoot for in taking out of reserves.
Hey, Teresa, can you send me that? Do you have that up? And then I can share screen it.
I can do it.
I could share my screen if you would like. I have it up.
Go right ahead.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try to share the screen. Nope. You won't let me. It says
Hang
host
on a minute.
table.
I'm working on it. Where's Teresa? There we go. All right, try it now, Teresa. Oh, am I on mute? Teresa, go ahead and try it now. There you go.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Can you see
Okay.
it?
Yeah, it's coming. Mine said, there it went. You got it.
You can see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So I even had that, I had that ready for us to put that additional scenario in. So is it big enough that, can you guys see it on your screen?
Yes.
Trying to
Thank
you
Yes.
guys are here. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So what, basically what you've seen this, what Mike was indicating is you've seen this chart here, the second one, I don't know how quick it is coming up, but we're going to see a big difference here based on the scenarios. It can be anywhere from 6% to 18% in the first year, and by the third year, 23 to 60. So we want to see which, and that this additional scenario would be for this year where we want to be. So what I heard from you, Mike, is 95% is what you're hearing from the county or the city.
It was a county. It's what the county used. It's anybody's guess. It's probably an educated guess on their part. It's probably not a bad one on our part. You know, we'll find out. But that's my suggestion.
So what do the rest?
Sounds like a good middle ground to use as an estimate.
Yes, and you know, really, these are all hypotheses, but yeah, I agree. 95 is a good middle point.
Okay. We'll
Yeah,
move on then.
I agree as well, Teresa.
Okay.
I do too. This is Anne. I mean, I'm looking at scenario 3 and it seems to be way too much.
So we have agreement on the 95?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the next one, the corporate personal property replacement tax.
You know, I'm not sure what this is, but I just reading, I Googled it. It says it's a tax imposed on income of corporations, Chapter
Right.
S corporations, partnerships. I would think this would be down. I mean, since income from partnerships, trusts, public utilities, income of corporations. I don't know what
Damon,
other
do you have anything to add to that on a definition there of that?
No, it's a crazy thing to try to explain. It is considered more local revenue. It would be something that's probably going to be more affected by this kind of situation. So I would probably be conservative. A good suggestion may be for us to communicate with some other school districts in the area to see what, as a group of people, what is everybody thinking that they might be looking at as far as budgeting for that.
Damon, how big of dollars are we talking about for this line item?
The total for this, I believe this year was about $800,000.
Yeah, so
that's
it's not.
and it's weird to say that's not a huge part of our budget. I think we could, Damon's good idea to talk to others not only about this line item, but what they're doing, what they're guessing on all of the line items, and try to find out if there's really a statistical sample that everybody's going along with. But in my mind, Karen, we're already showing it as down. Scenarios 1 is 10% down, 2 is 20%,
Yeah.
3 is 30% down. So, you know,
I'd pick 80 for now and then talk to other schools, but I also think that, you know, it might be helpful to talk to some corporations, like what are they anticipating I mean, how much is it down in terms of their business?
I tend to agree with Mike. I mean, this is not a huge percentage of our budget, but I mean, it wouldn't hurt to get some other feedback. But you know, ours is typically tax-based, so you know, 800,000 isn't a huge
Right.
number.
So I think
Right.
we just
You know,
at
and the
8%.
other thing too, I was going to say, a seminar that I listened into, and I think Damon might have been on it, and Scott, and maybe Tim, that during the recession from 2008 to 2013, the lowest it went down was 25%. So it'd be 75%. That'd be the worst case scenario. So I think 80% is fine because I think it was an average over those years.
I agree. And we already know state.
Scott said earlier, our best path is to perhaps be conservative in this, and so try to be accurate but conservative, and err on the side of conservatism, and then be happily surprised instead of unhappily surprised if things turn out better. So 80 is fine. Let's move on. State-based funding, we've already heard from Dr. Dearman that is anticipated to be 100%. Let's use that and hope that it is.
Mandated categorical payments. I've never seen them only give 2. You know.
Well, and it said in that bill that passed, it's level funding, so it's going to stay the
For the categoricals too.
Yeah, categorical payments, early childhood programs, and there's an increase in special education reimbursement.
So that got to be a 4 then.
I guess the question is the timing. Like sometimes, Damon, don't you get a payment for last year late, and then you can't count it on this year's or something like that?
Well, yeah, you're right, Karen, in that they're usually making up for it, but since we're a cash basis, it doesn't matter as long as we get it between July and June, we count it, yeah.
And so it's 4 is our normal?
4 is the set amount that they are supposed to pay, yes.
Okay, so let's do 4 for that, right?
Yes, I would agree. Budgeted investment income.
I mean, Mr. Hackett, have you looked at this at all? Where we are? We're down 50%. We're down 35%. We're down 20%.
Yeah. So let me jump in here and kind of explain this.
Yeah,
so
please.
we were very conservative on budgeting investment income revenue. So what you're seeing is I took the FY20 budgeted amount and then did a percentage of that. The actual amounts for this year are very good. This is the best year we've had in investment income. Even before the end of the year, we were approaching almost $800,000 in investment income. Last year, which was mine and Dr. Dearman's first year, we were at, I believe, $650,000. The 2 years before Dr. Dearman and I came, it wasn't anywhere close to $650,000. It was in the 400,000s, I believe. So we've had 2 very good years of investment income. This one, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, just to know, because as with anything, we don't know when the rebound will happen. So we're just very conservative on that. So like I said, this is based on the budgeted amount, but the actual amount is much higher than what we budgeted this year and the year before.
So what do you anticipate this year to be, Damon?
It's so hard to say. I think I would probably be somewhat conservative. I would probably go with maybe look at what we budgeted for FY20 and go with like 40% of that. Because again, like I said, we were very, very conservative on the revenue budget. So I would probably go with 40% of what we budgeted for FY20.
Well,
That
but if
sounds good.
FY20 was conservative, I mean, wouldn't you want to go closer to 100%? I mean, wouldn't you want to go more like 70? Why would you pick 40?
Because what I'm saying is, so if we budgeted for in the ed fund, if we budgeted $200,000 for interest income, I would take 40% of that number and budget that for FY21.
I guess my question is, what are actuals coming in at? What will actual be for 20?
Probably close to 800,000.
That's normally how I do things, but
But you have to think about it. It was a very good year. I mean, interest
exactly.
rates,
You're
Well,
exactly
so
right.
maybe we take 50% of what we had last year.
Well,
Of the 800.
I'll raise another point. Those investments that we're generating these returns off of were around $18 million, while at the same time we had somewhere in $30 million in a money market account.
Right. It's going to be more this year.
I think we're going to be taking a bunch of that money market money and putting it in investments, hopefully generating well more than we do in money market interest received. So,
but the thing I would caution you on is all of that money in the money markets was generating interest all this year.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it was all at a higher rate than even we're going to get starting, with Fortress, because that's only at a 0.375. Our entire year of money markets until we got to the last month or so was above that 3.75. So that's why I'm saying I would be conservative, because we're not going to generate as much money in interest this year. I mean,
I agree.
let me ask a point of interest. 0.375. I thought our agreement was a starting rate of 0.5. Wasn't that?
What I was told today was the floor of the agreement is 0.375, and to my knowledge, at this point, it's at the floor. As it increases, then it would go up. But I was told today it was 0.375 is the floor.
Damon, will you please take a look at the prior documentation that was drafted, that was given to us, and I will too, because I would have sworn it that was 0.5.
Yep.
And it's an artificial floor, because it's based on LIBOR, which is really nothing. But the bottom line is this: that money can be moved around. If we need to, we can bid that out and find out who's willing to pay us the most money on our taxpayer dollars. And if we have to, we'll do that.
Right, absolutely. I would, like I said, I'm just being a little bit more conservative because in FY20, until we got towards the end, the interest rates were, really increasing. So a lot of that money that I invested in Charles Schwab over the last year or the last 2 years, we got to see the benefits of a little bit higher interest rate. And we're talking, around, 1.6 to 2% on some CDs. And right now, we're not probably close to that. So.
Right.
Well, here
I
again,
think that's a great point, Damon. I forgot about that. I forgot that those interest rates were really high in the first part of the year. Yeah.
They weren't very high for very long. It was a promise.
No, not for very long, but we definitely saw some higher.
No, it wasn't, Karen. But
Okay.
They yanked them up and then they yanked them down.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if we're going to engage in this RFP for a professional investment management company, we have to assume that they're going to do their jobs, what they're trained to do, and generate better returns. If they don't, we'll be getting rid of them very quickly. But hopefully they'll be generating more returns for us, and I think they will. So maybe split the baby and not 50 and not 40, but call it 45%. And I don't want this thing to be so ugly that it causes us to go into dire slash and burn mode.
Once again, this isn't a huge part of our budget, so I think.
Yeah,
I think.
Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's small. I mean, the big thing is EAV.
EAV and property tax, yeah.
All right. I have no idea where food service sales will be, so I'm going to have to rely on somebody else.
Damon,
that's
can you
not
give it?
money.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Is food sales is a huge moneymaker either? I mean,
I mean, again, not a huge one. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about, you know, 600,000 to 700,000, but all, you know, all those 600,000 to 700,000
right, it
obviously
adds up.
add up. You know, in these scenarios, again, these were, and let me kind of make one thing clear. The plan has always been when we do the FY21 budget, it wasn't going to be like we're going to pick scenario 1 or pick scenario 2. We were going to obviously have a hybrid, which is kind of what we're doing now. So that was always the plan. In
Right. I mean, that's what you're gonna do July
Right. Exactly.
and August. So, I mean,
Exactly.
we're kind of putting the cart in front of the horse, but
We are.
I know you do.
Right,
the same.
but I think it is a good exercise before we have this committee to at least come up with our best guess right now, even though we know it's going to change, because then it helps us to have a better idea of how much we should look at having to cut.
So on the food service sales, these are really kind of, again, just all guesses. This is more so based on, are we going to be in remote learning? Because if we're in remote learning, then obviously like the end of this year, we don't have food service sales. So again, it's just kind of your best guess. You know, the more we get, and Dr. Dearman can maybe correct me if I'm saying anything inaccurate. I think the closer we get to the beginning of the school year, the more and more it's going to look like we're going to be in school. That's kind of the feeling that we as administrators are starting to get. So I don't think that food service sales probably is going to really come into play. If we're in school, then we're going to budget based on, you know, a trend over the last few years of what our revenue has been.
Yeah, I would tend to want to go with 90% there.
Yeah, go with 90, and we can always fix it if we find out differently.
Athletic admissions?
So again, this is all based on the fact of we don't know what sporting events we're going to have. Again, as we get closer to the school year, it certainly is looking like there's going to be fall sports. We don't have any guidance for sure yet on it. But
what do we typically bring in a normal year?
It depends on the sport. I mean, I can throw out a couple numbers for you that I know off the top of my head. So let's take football, for example. You know, football, revenue is about 18,000 to 20,000. That's obviously our biggest money maker. Boys basketball would be next. So I don't have the total in front of me exactly of what all the admissions would be, but again, not huge numbers.
Right.
90%?
What'd you say, Mike?
90%?
It really depends on whether or not they allow spectators. So
Yeah, no
Well, that's a
spectators
great point.
are allowed, you won't have any.
And it depends on if
I
they
would-
do, who's going to, if, you know, the number of people that will come. So,
Yeah,
And it's
no,
really not a huge amount either. Here. I mean,
No.
that's even less
No
than
matter what
than
percent.
input.
no matter
I mean,
what
that's-
percent we use, it's not going to hit our budget very much. So
Right.
This is one where I think it would be down, just because some people aren't gonna come regardless with
Right.
everything that's happened.
Afraid to be exposed. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'll
maybe
be
make
there.
it 75% to
Yes,
just to put a number out there.
yes.
and I think it's the same with food service sales. If people aren't coming, they're not gonna be buying food either. So,
Also, same question, Damon, with federal revenue. What do we typically bring? I know we don't bring as much in as other things, but our federal revenue.
here's what I will tell you about federal revenue. Even during the economic downturn back in 2008 through 2009, the one thing that we could always count on was the federal revenue. And really, with federal revenue, that's pretty much grant-based. We're going to get our federal revenue.
And what do we usually generate from federal?
So
I
let's
know
say
it's not much.
100%.
Our total, let me see if I can pull it up here. Sorry, I don't have all these numbers right in front of me.
I think we should put that one at 100%, don't you, Damon?
Yes, I would.
I would.
Agree with that.
I agree. No matter what the number is, put it at 100%.
So we can move on. County schools facility sales tax?
Yeah.
That one I think will be down significantly.
And that's how much is that, Damon? About $1 million?
1.4 million.
Okay.
Yeah, that's gonna be down based on lack of sales even just over the past 2 or 3 months.
Mhm.
What's the last one you received, Damon? Is that representative of?
No, not yet.
No?
We haven't,
Okay.
the next one we get, which will be in the middle of June, will be for March. So we haven't even, it's a lag, so we haven't even seen, you know, what the effects are gonna be yet.
I agree with you, Karen. I think it would be on the lower side.
Yep.
Like 60% maybe?
Yep.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
or at least 75%, because we're gonna lose that first quarter, or the second quarter, I guess.
We can
Yeah.
be more conservative and go with the 60 until we know more.
Yeah, I would, that's what I would do.
Okay, the EAV.
And for EAV, guys, we already know what it is for 21. And so I don't know that we probably want to spend too much time on EAV because we've got basically our numbers for the 21
Right.
budget.
But when I talked to him, he said between 1.5 and 2, but did he tell you 1.5?
The last number I know I got was 1.5, but I think sometimes depending on the day you talk to him, you get different
Yeah.
answers.
Okay. That's weird
Salary
though, because those numbers should already be in.
administrative,
What I'm
mm.
concerned about, just to go back to EAV, is I'm concerned about flat and flat. And if you ask him, I mean, he will not give it to you because,
Right.
you know, he doesn't have it. But my concern is just looking around at property values. And traditionally, if you look at the past, when unemployment is high, EAV goes down. And so, you know,
Right.
unemployment is extremely high. And so
But,
my
but,
guess.
but keep in mind, those flat and flats are not for the FY21 budget. That would be
Oh, I
like
know.
FY22 and 23.
That's true. That's true. So we
Correct.
don't, yeah.
And for this exercise, we're just doing the,
Right.
Yes,
So
we want.
we'll definitely revisit that, obviously, when we get into 22 and 23.
Okay, good point.
Can I raise the point about the county schools facility sales tax? The county was projecting 26% down in sales tax. Does that lessen the damage? I mean, we're looking at 40%.
It'd be 74.
Yeah,
Do we know how the county came up with their projection?
no.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd just take theirs and, I mean, think that it's going to be accurate, but maybe they have more information. I don't know.
Well,
Well, and by the time we finalize the budget, guys, you know, we're going to be talking August and September. They may have a
Right.
better idea of what kind of recovery they're going to see.
do we have any reason to suspect it's 40% down though? We don't have any basis for that either.
Yeah, we can make it 75 or 70%.
which one do you guys want?
It doesn't matter. So that's fine.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
fine.
we'll tweak it as we go along. Salary increases is the next one.
Well, administrative, but non-certified, I guess the only one would be, neither, because we haven't agreed.
Will that
So I
be,
guess-
we're going to revisit that, right?
Right?
Maybe at the end of the year, so do,
You know, for the sake of this argument, leave it at none right now. We know this is going to be tweaked along the way, but I'm kind of curious to what this projects.
I think the next two, Damon, are givens, right? They're
Yep.
contracted.
Well, has anybody ever thought about asking them, you know, instead of cutting staff, maybe they'd rather push off their increase a year? Do they ever consider that, or how considered are they during these times?
I would think they would not want to do that.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll do the other then.
I could be wrong. What does anybody else think?
It's bargained. I'm going to let Scott answer that question, or Damon.
I don't see that as a likely scenario. You know, we have a contractual agreement and they're going to expect us to honor that.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, let me jump in. That's a question for this committee to deal with. It's not a question for the purpose of deciding what our baseline is. So we're getting ahead of ourselves when we start asking that question, okay? Let's get
Yeah,
back to what-
I agree, Mike.
thank
I just
you.
thought it was a good time to bring it up, so I did. It's okay. Let's move on.
Oh, no, I mean, we got to talk about stuff. So it's a good question that
But it's a
it
heavy
is.
one, so.
yeah.
So the health insurance benefit, Damon, do you have a number that it is 7% or?
We're in the middle with CIE as far as those discussions. I think, Dr. Dearman, you can jump into, in July, I believe we're going out to bid. So we'll probably have more realistic numbers towards the beginning of August on this. And these were numbers that when I discussed it with Keppel and Company, I kind of ran the numbers by them and said, hey, this is what I'm looking at. He said, I think you're on target.
Okay, because I did talk to somebody in the healthcare field and they thought these numbers were low. They thought that we would see greater increases given all the hits that the health insurance, that the health, industry has had, but,
What we actually just heard at our CIE meeting the other day was that it's very competitive. It's a buyer's market right now.
Really?
Because there haven't been nearly as many claims because people haven't been using their insurance. And so it's actually more of a buyer's market. So hopefully it'll work to our advantage. And historically, Dr. Dearman, do you remember what they told us at CIE? The historical increase was like 3%?
A little over 3%.
Yeah.
I can just tell you from the initial proposal that I am on the insurance committee for Central Illinois Educators, and have been previously and will be on in July. That number, 7%, is very conservative. I think that's probably a little bit high, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Our initial proposal was right at 7.5%, and that's before we even started to bargain.
Scott, have we ever looked into the Prairie State Insurance Cooperative? I'm looking at a list, and there must be 100 and some school districts that are a part of this cooperative. Have we ever looked into that to see if maybe our insurance rates would be better through that than through one agency?
I don't know if anyone within CIE has made that comparison, but I can find out.
But we aren't really we're with a co-op already. What's the question, Mike?
I was presented with some information on this cooperative that has, I can't remember the number, 100 and some school districts. And I'm just wondering if when's the last time that we bid out our insurance?
They bid it out almost every year. It's just that we
Every
use
year.
the broker. We use Mike.
Right,
Keppel.
we don't, but we haven't bid out the broker.
No.
We got to look at everything, folks, okay?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. Let's look at all of it.
In any event, I was presented with information on this Prairie State Insurance Cooperative. I don't know if it would save us by the same surface, but there's no reason not to at least look at it and look into it.
I'll look into it and get back to you.
I can share this information with you too, Dr. Dearman.
Please do.
I will.
Also talked about the option of self-insurance forever, and there are many, many brokers out there who think it's ridiculous that we're not self-insured. Now, of course, they're wanting to sell it, so they're maybe biased, but that has been something that we're so large and we're such a large player in our co-op that there's some people who think it would be cheaper for us to be self-insured.
How big is the co-op that we're in, Karen?
Scott knows. Is it like 13? I don't know.
Oh, heavens no. We just added Morton. Morton joined CIE. Farmington joined CIE. Deer Creek Mackinac joined. We've had like 5 or 6 more join just this year. So it's continuing to grow.
15 schools or 25 or I can't
It's
remember.
probably closer to 25 now.
Okay.
I served on the board as well, and I will tell you that our experience was very, our loss experience was good, and people were just dying to get into our cooperative. And oftentimes we would have to look at their experience, and if it wasn't good, then we wouldn't accept them into the cooperative. But it's been a very I want to say it's been a good cooperative for the districts. It was for Norwood, and it never hurts to shop around and see what other people can provide. But I do know that it was a well sought after group to get into, and not everybody could qualify. So,
Dr. Humbles, I just found this information. This cooperative has 211 members, and it's from the top of the state to the bottom and from one side to the other. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm just saying it's probably something we ought to at least take a look at.
sure.
I agree with you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm always for that.
I'd also like to look in the self-insured as well.
So what do we put on here for this line item? Is it 7%?
At this point,
If you think that's the best number to put in, you're probably in the best position to guesstimate at that. So I would just suggest we follow your lead on this. What do you think's the right number?
Leave it at 7. It won't be any worse than that. It'll probably be better.
Okay.
What's the dollar amount on that? Does he have that? Do you know?
The dollar amount for how much our insurance costs?
Yeah. How much do we pay out for that?
The percentage of the district pays, versus what the teachers pay. It's based on the number of employees.
Right. What's our budget item for it? I can't remember, but it's big.
I would have to look it up. I don't have it.
That's okay.
and I think when we do this, when I look at baseline, Damon, if you could put what the actuals were for fiscal year 20 in there, I think that would help everyone as well to understand that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
So Damon, can you put together a new baseline for us based on this information and shoot it out to us, tomorrow or ASAP?
Yeah, I got some meetings tomorrow. I'll try to get to it first of the week and get a new baseline out for you, sure.
Or the projections for that scenario.
Yeah, because folks, we don't have the luxury of time. I mean, we're talking about a preliminary or an estimate in July, and then one that we have to semi-adopt in August, and one we have to finally adopt in September. We got a lot of work to do between now and then, so we have to get.
Hey, and this is Cheryl. I absolutely agree with what you guys are all saying. I'm wondering, Teresa, can you pop up your second slide?
Can.
So this slide is in the fund categories, and I mean it's great. I mean, you can see the bottom line numbers and everything. I'm just wondering, we're tracking with the first slide based on we're changing, the forecast. Can this slide track that, or?
I would have to do that once Damon provides the numbers. What I would do is add our scenario in there so you can see it side by side.
Okay, and in each of the categories that are on slide 1?
Correct. Damon, I'm making an assumption you'll do it the same way as you did this one as well.
Yes, I can do that.
Right.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey,
And
Teresa,
go ahead.
could you go back up to the other slide real quick for me?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And send this to both Dr. Dearman, well, to everyone.
Thank
you. Looking at the biggest number in here is that property tax received number. And we're going from 97% to 95%. So tracking it down, it's probably scenario 1 with a little uglier projection at the bottom. I am guessing.
I agree with you, Mike, just by taking a quick look at this.
Yeah.
What do you mean by a little uglier at the bottom?
It means it's going to be, since we're going down just a little bit in some of these categories, some are going up a little bit. Basically what he's saying, and I'm going to go to the next slide here for a minute, that it's going to be a little bit worse than scenario 1.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yep.
But not as bad as scenario 2, so somewhere in the middle there.
Between the two scenarios, yeah.
Okay. And then how do we come up with a number that we think this committee should look at in terms of cuts versus reserves to pay for it? What percentage should be reserves? What percentage should be cuts?
Where are we at right now for reserves? How many days? Like 500?
Yeah, we went into this fiscal year about 450, I believe.
Okay. Well, I would like to get that recommendation from you guys after you run the numbers. And then the board can reach a consensus based on your recommendations.
Dr. Dearman, when do you anticipate putting together the superintendent committee, or does the board want it to be a board committee for this finance or for this particular budget scenario?
No, I'm not on mute. I think Mike makes a good point in that we need to get moving fairly quickly. And if we make it a committee of the whole, then we're subject to Open Meetings Act and 48 hours notice and keeping minutes and approving minutes and all these other things. I would rather have a superintendent committee with 2 board members on it, and I could get that started next week.
I agree. I agree.
Does the board feel comfortable with that? Are they okay with the it being a superintendent committee rather than a board committee, which requires the minutes and the posting and whatnot?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, the bottom line, Dr. Humbles, it's going to have to come back to the full board for approval anyway. So
Right.
I think
Right.
speed is of the essence right now. And so we need to streamline this process as much as we can.
What board members are going to be on the committee?
I'd like to be on that committee. And I think,
Yeah, and I don't want to interrupt, but I think Teresa and Mike have worked a lot of these numbers. And it's been very helpful. But, you know, I don't know if they want to be on
Well,
the committee, but
I think Dr. Humbles should be on it. And frankly, I'm chairing that RFP for the investment management firm. So Teresa, if you, and I know that's going to be taking up quite a bit of my time, if you have time to be on that committee, I think you're a good choice. But I'll leave it up to you as to whether you have that time.
I'm going to say that I will do that as long as I have a backup that could take my place in the event I couldn't be at a meeting or something like that. Based on, I think we all have pretty heavy workloads too. And I'm doing.
Karen, would you be willing to be her backup?
You know, I would. I'd really rather focus on the curriculum, but I could do that.
If you don't want to be the backup, Karen, you know, being a backup, I can probably step in.
Okay.
It's your
That'd
call.
be great. Mm-hmm.
Don't be absent too much, Teresa. That's
As long as we have the meetings between 2 and 3 a.m., we're good.
I'm asleep by 8, so 8 p.m. No. And we could even do some of this virtually if you need to, Teresa.
Yeah, okay. Either way works.
Okay. Sounds
All right,
good.
and Damon, I remember, I have it in my notes that the promise to us was a floor of 0.5. And if that's what was promised to us, that's what this board voted on. And if they're going back and wanting to reduce it, I want to know why.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, is that in the proposal or is that just in some notes that you wrote down?
I think it's in some notes that I wrote down. I have to go back through and see what that's why I'm saying you and I need to go back through the actual documents.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want it to be 0.5, what they agreed to.
Yeah, if that's what they promised, I think they need to fulfill that promise.
That's what we thought it was going to be, so I think we definitely need to check before we move forward.
If I'm right, I could be wrong, but we need to check.
My understanding with that, I don't have any documentation in front of me, was when the initial proposal was pitched, that was the number, Mike. Now, I don't know if markets changed from the time it was originally discussed to the time it came to the board. You and Dame will have to talk to Fortress about that, but I do remember the 0.5 as well.
I do too. I don't like it when unilateral switches are made, as was done before with our money market accounts. And we found out about it after the fact. Not good policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Off my
Hey,
soapbox.
Yeah, and I think that's really good to explore. If I recall correctly, and I know that was several months ago, but I thought there was a little bit of wiggle room, and I think I asked some follow-up questions trying to really pin it down. And that might be worth going back and looking. That was an open session, but I don't remember what month.
Yeah, you know what? I remember that too, Cheryl.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, if this is our expectation, then we need, I mean, it's all a negotiation, right? And so it's worth, asking. All you can do is ask, and all they can do is say no. But if you don't
No.
ask, the answer is no.
No matter what, even 0.375 is better than 0.05, which is what we're getting right now, which is just nuts. That's either way, it's something we have to make happen to maximize on those returns on monies that we do have. Okay, so. But I would just like to know, but Cheryl, if that's the case, then that's fine. I just, if a commitment was made, we need to get it honored. If it wasn't, then, and there was some wiggle room, then we understand that the rates are pretty crazy right now.
Right. But, I think before we sign the dotted line or whatever, maybe we already have, but this is
Yeah.
the time to leverage it.
Yeah. Damon, have we signed that agreement? Did we sign that document?
Yeah, you guys approved that back in April.
Yeah, I thought
believe-
so. So, I mean, we have a signed document.
Yeah, so we'll look.
Yeah. Okay. Can you let me know what you find?
Absolutely.
Actually,
you.
all of us, I'd like to hear too.
Yep, I will let you guys know as soon as we find
Okay,
out.
thanks. Mhm.
I have company.
Okay, well, have we, any other issues to cover this evening regarding budget and financing? Hello? Are you there?
Can't think of anything.
Okay, all right, and then kind of off, let's see, then I guess we're going to need to have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
That was the Mrs. Disharum, was that you?
Yes.
May I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Henry, any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned at 7:15. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks.